Before we start, we would like to give you a quick overview on what we're going to do for the next 45 minutes. First, we're going to go a little bit into the theoretical background. We're going to talk about methods and procedures. Then, most important, of course, the hypothesis and our results that we achieved. And later on, we would like to discuss those results together with you. Pulsed radiofrequency therapy. What is that actually? Transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency has been used for decades in chronic pain patients. Some studies do indicate positive effects on inflammation processes. Some individuals do even report an improvement of mood and energy. And this is in accordance to actual stress research. What mechanisms do lie behind the transcutaneous application of pulsed radiofrequency? We decided not to go into detail on that, since we have two great masters in the audience who are going to talk exactly about that later on this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon. We are going to focus more on stress and inflammation. It is well known that emotional stress may cause extensive somatic measurable changes, both in the field of psychology as well as in the immune system, based on bidirectional brain-to-immune communication. Also, the sequences affect the whole organism. The source of the pathological process is the brain, with an accent to the hippocampus. The brain is particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress because of its high oxygen consumption. Of importance is here that we have to keep in mind that the causal relationship is not yet fully determined. This is really important. But we're going to hear about that later on. Let's have a closer look on that. It is common knowledge that stress is activating the sympathetic system. It is also a given fact that inflammation processes have an effect on the autonomous system. But where is the link to the heart now? It is proven that illness, as well as the implicated stress, do have an impact on the heart rate. Recently, as we can see here, there was a very interesting study published highlighting the association of the heart rate and inflammatory biomarkers in the body. As we all know, there are a lot of medical conditions that are associated with inflammatory processes in the body, such as arteriosclerosis, stroke, diabetes. But as well, there are a few psychological conditions that are, according to latest research, are linked to inflammatory processes in the body, such as depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, as well as maybe more. And this directly leads us over to the more concrete aspects of our study. The key issue we wanted to explore was whether we could find an effect of transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency on patients' mood and well-being. We decided to go for a double-blind study design. That does not mean we had glasses on, but that meant we had a treatment and a placebo group, and neither patients nor staff were privy to group allocation. Furthermore, we decided to go for 2 time measurements to aim for more reliable results. Later on, we will have a closer look on the procedures, but first of all, we have a look on the core of our study, the application of transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency as used in our study. To illustrate the application, we decided to draw back to pictures to give you an idea. Here you can see my colleague Daniel and myself with the application of transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency as conducted in our study. As you can see, we have 2 electrode plasters applied on the neck and the forehead of the patients. Each session lasted exactly 25 minutes. Important is here that placebo and actual treatment were conducted in exactly the same setting. The only difference was that in the placebo treatment, no current was applied. But since the transcutaneous application of pulsed radiofrequency is not perceptible, the patients could not differentiate between actual treatment or placebo group. There was even a study in 2015 by Chu claiming that the transcutaneous application is not perceptible. So let's have a closer look on the processes of our study. After recruiting, all patients signed an informed consent and were randomly assigned to either treatment or placebo group. In total, we were able to assess 42 patients who completed all both time measurements without missing data. The utilization of a secure trial data bank made it possible to control for gender and age during the randomization process. As already mentioned, we chose 2 time measurements, as you can see here. At the baseline assessment, the transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency treatment or placebo treatment took place. Afterwards, biofeedback sessions were carried out, and after that, the psychometric instruments were handed out and completed by the patients. I will go into detail on the used questionnaires later on. The first follow-up consisted again of the biofeedback session and the psychometric instruments, and was conducted 2 to 5 days after the first assessment. All the testings took place here in the Swiss Paraplegic Center in Nottwil. Yeah. So now we've talked about the formal processes of our study, but that leads us to the more important question on which variables we assessed and how we aim to assess them. So how did we measure and assess stress? Let's start with the assessment of pain stress. How did we assess the impairment of the individual? We decided to restrict to 3 variables. First of all, the perceived pain intensity, the number of given diagnoses, and the chronification stage of the main pain. To highlight here is that, in contrast to previous studies, we did not explicitly assess the pain location, nor the specification of the pain problems. That means we only asked for the pain level at the actual moment of the assessment. To assess the chronification, we used the chronification stages according to Gebershagen. I think that's common knowledge to most of all, so I'll just give a quick review on that. Previously, chronification was often only a criterion of time, but nowadays chronification does not rely entirely on time-based criteria anymore. Other factors such as the number of pain places, the strength of impairment, as well as pain problems accompanying the medical conditions gained more and more importance in the process of chronification. According to Gebershagen, we differentiate between 3 stages of chronification. The chronification stage 1, where we have a slight chronification, the chronification stage 2, with few painless episodes, and chronification stage 3, where we have a persistent pain. This, let's call it multidimensional approach, allows to cover different to the pain impairment related aspects. This is very important since pain is a construct that we can never grasp objectively. All assessment of pain has to stick to subjective descriptions. That we have to keep in mind for the next points as well. So to draw the line back to the key issue of our study, the effects on the well-being of transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency. The core question that we asked ourselves was that how could we assess the well-being adequately? Giving out questionnaires, on the one hand, is easy and is the most used tool in previous studies as well. But the problem is that stays very subjective. So for us, that was not enough. We aimed for a more objective way. So what did we do? It's clear that there's no entirely objective way to assess the well-being, as I said before. Nevertheless, there are physiological parameters that cannot be changed or influenced deliberately. We decided to assess those physiological parameters via biofeedback measurements. To put it in a nutshell again, one could say that we have 2 approaches. One subjective way to assess the well-being by giving out questionnaires, and one more objective way by assessing physiological parameters that cannot be changed deliberately. And before we have a closer look on those physiological parameters, I will go into detail a little bit on the psychometric instruments that we used. I think the time is good. Yeah. First of all, the depression anxiety stress scale by Lovibond and Lovibond. The self-report inventory encloses the 3 scales: depression, fear, and stress, with 7 items each. The original version has 42 items, but we used the edited version of the German translation, which encloses 21 questions to assess the general well-being. Why did we choose it? Because it has proven to be an economic and reliable screening method for patients with pain, as well as chronic pain. To explain this, chronic pain disturbances and depressive symptoms are often closely interweaved. That means that a person suffering from chronic pain might be reduced in drive because of the pain, might have less appetite because of the pain, and might maybe not function in his or her social life as he or she did before because of the pain and not because of depression. To conclude this, suffering pressure, as well as the impairment of the affected individual, may lead to over-assessment of depressive symptoms. Second, the numeric rating scale for pain, I think, which is known to everyone over here. Important here is as well that the numeric rating scale for pain has shown to be sensitive to changes in the perceived pain intensity. And last but not least, the Marburg questionnaire on habitual well-being, which graphs not only the momentary feeling, but also the habitual well-being, referring to a time frame of the last 7 days. Of importance here is as well that the one-dimensional scale has shown to be sensitive to changes in the well-being. Now that we've talked about the psychometric instruments, I would like to draw your attention back to our second approach on how to measure stress. It is common knowledge that stress has an effect on the cardiovascular system, referring to this simply in terms of that stress, in which ways, however, is activating sympathetical activity. This effect can be assessed by variations in the heart rate. But what is the heart rate actually? And how can we measure or assess the heart rate variability? The heart rate variability is the natural ability of the organism to adapt the frequency of the heart rhythm. And normally this happens naturally and without us being conscious. But my colleague Daniel is an expert on SDNN and on biofeedback, and he will go into detail more on the variables that we assessed.
Does it work? Yeah, it does.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Already in former times, in times of the ancient Greek, one was thinking about where in the human is the soul placed. No? On which place is the soul? No? Aristoteles, he was convinced that the soul is placed in the heart, and that the brain is there for cooling the body. I don't know if that's right, but maybe we can bring some light in that. But my point is, the brain and the heart, they are really, or the soul and the heart, the emotions and the heart, they are closely interconnected. There is a very interesting article which is called "A heart is not a metronome," or "A healthy heart is not a metronome." This will say that a healthy heart is able to adapt on stress or on relaxation very quickly. And we can see that in the variations between the R beats. No? You see, if you have a close look, you would say, oh, they're all the same. No? It's very rhythmic, it's a sinus rhythm. But if we are looking a bit closer into this ECG, you see the distances between R beats, they are varying. No? And that's a good thing. No? It's not an arrhythmia, it's not pathological. It means that the heart is in a healthy condition. No? And it's a measurement which is easy to assess. There are some more measurements which are also going into this question, heart and emotions, heart and stress. But this SDNN is quite simple and it's widely used. It's also been used in the study we've seen before. We get us here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so. And it measures also quite quick changes. No? And a high SDNN, a high variability, is meaning that the vagal system, the parasympathetical system, is activated, while on the other side, if SCNN goes down, people are under stress. No? And if you work as a biofeedback therapist, you can see this effect in daily practice. No? It's very visible. You can see that in let's say 95% of the patients, if they come in stress, the SDNN goes down. So that's fascinating. No? But it's not only stress, it's also... Huh? Okay. Hello. Yeah, it's not only stress, it's also, for example, overweight is bringing down the SDNN. If you don't do enough sports, your SDNN goes down. If you are exposed to noise, it brings down your SDNN. And also, which we have heard before, for me this is still maximally amazing, no? That psychiatrical conditions are connected with inflammatory processes and are interconnected with changes in the activity of the heart. No? When I was studying in the 90s, nobody was thinking about such conditions. No? Okay. Oh, yeah. And here you have a short look at our device that we are using in daily practice. Nearly all devices which are used in clinics, they are very valid. They give you a good and reliable signal so that you can work with that. And we tried to assess the heart rate variability in 3 different conditions. The first one is what everyone does. You bring your patients in a relaxation condition. We have chosen a 5-minute time where the patients were sitting quietly in front of the screen. They were watching the movie of this computer-generated aquarium connected with a relaxing sound. And I think all the patients that I've worked with until now, for them this was okay. It was quite relaxing. No? Then we exposed the patients to a 2-minute stress. We would like to show you how this is working. This is an adapted Stroop test. I don't know if everybody of you knows Stroop test. It is a test that is very common used, has been used for decades in neuropsychological testing. Patients have to concentrate on the number of the presented words red and blue. And they have to count how many times do I see the word red and how many times do I see the word blue. But the patients are distracted because the words come in colors, no? And these colors tend to distract you. No? So that's quite a stress.
What is maybe important to mention is that normally you click with your finger, but we were scared that clicking with the finger would lead to motion artifacts in assessing the heart rate. So we asked our patients to keep the appearances of the numbers in the head and add them together, and they were asked in the end. So adapted and maybe even more stressful.
That's quite important. The patient should not move while they were monitored and assessed. We have assessed the pulse and the breathing activity, and moving would cause artifacts. Okay. I think we have a little bit time, so we are a bit proud to show you also our 3rd condition, which was an idea that both of us were liking quite a lot, because one knows that positive emotions do also have an effect on our heart rate and can help us to relax and to cope with stress. And so we tried to create some positive emotions. We also had to look at a video clip which is not too funny, so that people don't laugh. If you laugh, you have the artifacts again. So we had a video clip where maybe you can smile. So if you like, we have 2 minutes and 15 seconds for that. Did you feel your SDNN rise up? Probably it did, yeah. In most of the patients, the relaxation effect was better in a funny movie than in a relaxation condition. But not in everyone. I think it's also depending on how you perceive this movie. Some patients perceive it as very bad, so you don't smile. Just to make it sure, the inclusion and exclusion criteria are, as usual, we were working with the chronic pain patients from the Center for Pain Medicine, aged 18 between 65, and we excluded patients who had, next to their chronic pain condition, other severe health problems such as cancer or severe psychiatrical disorders. Naturally, we also had to exclude patients with heart conditions or with a medication affecting the activity of the heart rate. And just to be sure, we also excluded women who were pregnant or breastfeeding. Yeah. Now we come to the final, we come to the hypothesis and then to the results. For sure, our hypotheses go in two directions. One is, do we have an effect on the objective capability of coping with stress? Do we have an effect on the vagal activity? The other one, do we have an effect on the subjective well-being, on depression, anxiety, and so on, and on pain? For statistical evaluation, we had decided to use Mann-Whitney-U tests for the difference between the groups. between follow-up and beginning. Another way to look into this data is the Brunner model, which is used here in the house very often. It is a kind of ANOVA for non-normal distributed data. It's a bit sophisticated. You can do it on your laptop at home. You have to see the experts for that. Yeah. And before Johanna is telling you about the results, I just can give you an overview of our study population, and you see that the randomization has worked quite well. No? The average age is 44.8, and it does not really differ between placebo group and treatment group. No? The chronification status, as you all would suppose, is quite high, is between 2 and 3, so we have few patients who were status 1. Number of diagnoses, it's around 5, and as we heard in the morning, it's also in our sample, there are more women than men participating in this study. But there's no significance in the difference between the treatment and the placebo group.
So if you look at the results now of first the psychometric instruments, we do see that there's no significant change between the groups if you look at the treatment group and the placebo group. For example, here and here and here and here. There's a slight change, but it did not reach significant level. Also, as well, if we look at the perceived pain intensity down here, we do see a slight reduction, but it did not reach significant level. But I think here we also have to keep in mind that we have patients with chronic pain, who had pain for a very, very long time. It gets more interesting if we go to the results of the physiological parameters that we assessed. Here we do find significant interactions. As we can see, in the treatment group, the SDNN arose, whereas in the placebo group, the SDNN declined. And if we go back to Daniel's explanations, we know that a high SDNN is indicating, by the well-being, we can conclude that the person is relaxed, whereas a decline of SDNN would indicate that the person is more stressed. What is really interesting now is that if we look at the results, we see that we do find this interaction only in the stress sequence.
Significant, yeah.
Significant, yeah.
And we also see it in the relaxation sequence,
yeah.
But it does not reach significance, but it goes the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So in the stress sequence, the interaction is most clearly. And to conclude our results, we have to say that we did not find an effect of the transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency on the psychological parameters assessed via the questionnaires. As well, we do not find an effect on the perceived pain intensity. But it seems that transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency treatment has had a positive effect on the ability of our patients to cope with the stress condition. If we look at the graph on the right again, we do see that the treatment group does have a higher SDNN in the stress sequence than the placebo group. So the treatment group shows an increase of parasympathetical activity and a higher SDNN, whereas the placebo group seems to be more stressed at the follow-up testing. Of course, there are, as always, a few limitations that we have to name. The sample size of only 42 patients. Also, we have to claim that we did not find correlations in all statistical procedures. Important is as well that the selectivity of the sample population, which only consisted of chronic pain patients, the diversity of treatments next to our treatments, since these were all patients in the pain center here in Nottwil, and a certain lack of clarity concerning the transcutaneous pulsed radiofrequency parameters that we applied. we based all the calculations on the preliminary results that we achieved for my master thesis, but of course we cannot be 100% sure on them. Yeah, at the moment we are still collecting follow-up data, and we will continue the analysis of the data. It stays really interesting, I would say. And yes, of course, we would like to express our deepest gratitude and a big thank you to the whole team of the Pain Center here in Nottville, who helped us collect the data and always supported us, especially Menno, Suzanne, and Enschul. Thank you very much.
We did not put the names under the photos. Maybe you could guess it for yourself.
Oh yeah, we can go back. I think there's not much choice. Yeah, well, so...
yeah, I think we have time for one or two questions, at least.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh.
Yes?
Why did you think of a crossover? Why didn't you look for a crossover between the two groups?
You mean in a statistical analysis?
You could do that easily, I think.
Yeah.
No?
No one could consider this. Oh, I have to go over there. Yeah. One could consider this. Yeah. We have been discussing the processing of our data with our specialists from the house, and they said the method of choice would be this Brunner model, and they would not propose to do any other procedures. But I think you are perfectly right. I think we have to look very closely, and we have to think also about calculating crossovers. And we're still in that process now.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a very interesting point, and as we said, we are still in the calculations, and so it's a very good idea.
Another issue which we are addressing are correlations between the biofeedback data and the questionnaires, no? For both groups together, no? All 42 patients. So this is a very interesting thing too.
Yes.
But we have to be very careful because we have a huge number of variables with only 42 patients. Good.
Any more questions?
Any more? No more? So we thank you very much for attending our psychological assessment and our psychological part.